Hey guys, this is RogueSim087, and welcome to my show's review of the Tokyo Marui M4A1 MWS, which was just released around about a month ago, but I myself have only been playing around with it for about 1 or 2 weeks. I did get a chance to play around with it earlier. The second this came on Hong Kong, I pretty much took it around, just gave it a bit of a spin, but my own personal one, I've only gamed it for about 2 weeks. In fact, I've only been to like 2 games with this. I did also get a chance to take out the internals and all of stuff, just to take a closer look at what's actually going on inside the set system. So this video will basically try to cover all those little details that you guys may be interested in. And I also must say that in terms of the performance so far, it works quite well. Externals is also quite nice, despite how simplistic looking this is. I did pick this out a little bit. But anyways, back to the main point. As of right now, in December 2015, the availability is somewhat limited. But most places should be stocking them soon. At least, I find it hard to believe that they won't stock it soon. And the price is roughly around 3,000 to 3,200 Hong Kong dollars, with the magazines retailing for about 300 Hong Kong dollars to 320 Hong Kong dollars. If you look at the online prices, the US prices, you'll be looking at roughly around 450 US dollars and about 42 US dollars for the magazines, using eHobby's website as a reference, and they do stock it regularly. If you're interested in getting it online. Making the Marui M4WS, by the way, the most expensive gas blowback rifle in my collection, actually. As for the externals, there's really not too much to talk about, as this is just basically your standard 14.5-inch Colt M4, which should be familiar to most airsoft players out there. But I'll cover all the little tiny details anyways. So starting from the back, we have your telescopic stock with a loop to attach your sling, and this is the only place to attach your sling. Do note that the stock does wobble quite a bit on what seems to be a commercial spec buffer tube. I did test it out in one of these MFT Minimalist mil-spec stock, and it can be installed onto this Marui buffer tube. But adjusting it is really tight and very difficult. You can immediately tell that there's no play or wobble whatsoever. And here on my own personal setup, I have a Magpul Industries MOE stock, which also fits pretty well. And as you can tell, it's actually very difficult to adjust on mine as well. But there is a little bit of wobble, but it's not as much wobble as the original stock, which is the reason why I decided to stick with this one. Moving forward, we have standard M4 controls, such as the selector on the left side only, a functional forward assist, a bolt release, trigger guard, magazine release, and a pistol grip. All very familiar controls and ergonomics. And it's worth knowing that all these controls are very smooth and easy to manipulate. Nothing gets caught. You will also notice that the magazine release engages very quickly with the magazine and also drops freely. Oops. As for sights, Marui does provide you with a rear iron sight engraved with some Marui traits on it. And this rear iron sight is adjustable for windage and elevation with a small aperture only. You will also have a traditional front post iron sight, and in between these sights, you will find that you have a nice Colt engraved lower receiver with positional markings on the upper receiver that extends to the 7-inch rail that's firmly secured onto this delta ring and front post iron sight wear interfaces. It's worth noting that because of this design, you will not have the monolithic upper rail. Although this is not a huge problem for me, some people may have a problem with mounting accessories right in the middle here, which, as you should expect just by looking at this, you can tell. You will also note that the Marui M4 has a complete 14.5-inch outer barrel. This is not in pieces. This is not an extension. It's just a whole entire 14.5-inch outer barrel, and you will have an A2 comp at the end of it with a 14mm counterclockwise threads. And this comp can be twisted off simply with your hands. There is no grub screw or glue that keeps this on. There's only a rubber O-ring to help you position the comp in the correct orientation. And of course, for the most notable external feature is that the body and the magazines is finished in Cerakote, making this the first Cerakoted airsoft gun from Tokyo Marui that I'm aware of, which was quite surprising considering that the price is at 3,200 Hong Kong dollars or 450 US dollars, which is quite worth it in my opinion. By the way, for those who are not familiar, Cerakote is basically a super durable and resistant coating for real firearms, which is sort of expensive. It's almost like 1,000 to 2,000 Hong Kong dollars just to get it coated here in Hong Kong. I have no idea what prices people are looking at in the States. But as far as I can tell, it seems to be mostly done as an alternative aftermarket coating and done by professionals who are actually certified to do that coating. In Hong Kong, Cerakoted HA is one of the few who do that here. To be quite honest with you, I don't exactly care too much if it's Cerakoted. Like, it's a neat little feature, but it's honestly not a super big deal to me. But in case if you are a big fan of Cerakote, I can tell you that right now, the coating on this is very consistent throughout the whole entire body. Very smooth to the touch, very subdued. Furthermore, after seeing a couple of other Marui M4 MWSs, I feel confident enough to say that the quality control is very good. Let's take out the bolt, the buffer spring, and the buffer itself. And sorry if this video is a bit of a rush, because I don't want to make the video too long. Now, when you first take out that pin, you will notice that you need to do this a bit quickly. The reason why that is because the buffer seats into the bolt. And I'll show you that in a moment. And I might as well take out the bottom, the receiver pin, because in order to take the buffer out, you will need to push out the buffer stopper, and this is the buffer stopper. Notice how big it is. It is an actual physical block. It's just a block that holds the buffer, so this is very, very secure. And let's just put the lower receiver aside, and let's just look at what's in here. So this is the buffer spring, very, very normal. Sort of weak in my personal opinion. And this is the polymer buffer. Now, but there is an internal buffer spring inside, which is why it's spring-loaded. This is what gives it a bit of a cycling speed. So since this is so lightweight, it can move pretty fast. With additional of this buffer spring, moves quite decently fast. As you will see later on in the shooting video. It's not super, super fast, but it's not bad. Okay, so that's it for the buffer. And this is the charging handle. Charging handle is actually a little bit heavy. Just speaking this as a personal opinion, there's really not too much to note. I'm not exactly sure if real steel charging handles will fit, but this is just what the charging handle is, very, very simple. It does have this empty over here. I am skeptical of this breaking, just because I break almost every single stock charging handle, because I am a little bit rough with my gas pullbacks. I'm not going to say that it's going to wear, but it looks like it's been holding up so far. Anyways, that's it. And this is for the bolt. Now, this is the weird, interesting part. I would not be taking out my nozzle, but for the nozzle, very, very normal, right? It actually looks a lot like a WA nozzle, with the exception it doesn't have the polymer piece at the back. It actually has a polymer guide, a spring guide inside. If you actually look at Airsoft Taiwan's picture, there's like a little polymer thing inside this nozzle spring, and that's some sort of guide for the nozzle spring. I'm not exactly sure what that design actually does. Some people have theorized that it's meant that so that the nozzle spring doesn't move out of place and it doesn't get snagged up as the nozzle returns. I think that makes a lot of sense in my personal opinion, because if you've seen some WAs when you actually install them, if your nozzle spring is ever out of alignment, you'll get some problems. That sort of includes the ViperTech as well. The ViperTech does not, sometimes it has that thing at the end going off, sometimes. It's not a super, super big deal, you can fix it quite easily, but it's just inconvenient when it happens. And as for the rest of the bolt, for the back, this is like a piece that you can actually take off. It has an Allen key inside that you can take it off. And here is a roller. This roller makes it move a little bit smoother once inside the buffer tube. I think it's also meant to stabilize the movement of the bolt, just so it can move a little bit more linearly. You know, so you don't have that side friction and all that stuff. Of course, there's still friction, but, you know, this makes it a little bit better. I think that's the design purpose. And over here, you see this area? This area is to help cock the hammer. Now, I believe they went with this design is because normally, in most bolts, you'll just have this area flat. And that, if it hits the hammer over time, you'll have a dent over there. If you use a WE gun, you'll know exactly what I mean, because the WE bolts strip relatively quickly. If you use them for about 4 months, they break. They don't break, but they more like, you can see the wear pattern at the back of the bolt. There shows up like a little bit of a crescent C shape. Is because the hammer just keeps striking that area and it keeps breaking. So I think they went with this design just to reduce that problem. You must keep this in order for the hammer to cock, and I will show you the reason why later on. It's basically like a Glock blowback housing unit. You can't stand on the blowback housing unit without the hammer not working, because it needs it in order for the hammer to cock. Same thinking. And notice that the externals of the bolt is quite nice. Very, very nice looking. Oh, I forgot one of the most important parts. It has a steel reinforcement. This part is steel. Okay, I don't have a magnet, but this is steel that contacts the Z system bolt lock. Okay, this part is steel, so rest assured. It's been working very, very, very well. The bolt lock reliability is absolutely fantastic. Anyways, let's leave it there. The spring guide, by the way, is plastic as well, and it moves forward. Not exactly sure why it moves forward and not backward. Because when it hits something, it just stays still. So I'm guessing that something must push it forward. Not exactly sure what though, so I'm not exactly sure what to tell you there. But this is plastic. I'm not a big fan of this being plastic. Because this is the thing that contacts the charging handle. I don't want this to be plastic, but it's there. So before I take apart the lower I already started. Just take a look at how the bolt lock moves. Can you actually see how far it flips out? Look at how far that moves. How much flexibility it has. This is very different from the KSC system, where there's sort of a limit to how high this goes. This goes really, really high. And notice how this is the piece that contacts the bolt. This is your physical bolt catch itself, and this actuates the physical part that locks your bolt. Okay. Again, I don't know my terminology, but that's basically more or less how it works. Let's start with the basics of the lower for the Marui M4 MWS. So I got some good news for you guys. It actually uses a nut and a screw in order to help you secure your grip. And there are no D10 pins on the grip. Can you see that this is a Magpul K2 grip, and this hole over here is for the WE D10 pin and the D10 pin spring. On the Marui one, does not have it. The D10 pin, as you can see here, that's the D10 pin for the selector, so it's actually on the trigger box. So you don't have to manage anything springs or D10 pins, which is a good thing. And the reason why I say that this nut and the screw is a good thing is because this is very, very simple to replace. All you have to do is just get another size nut that fits in here, get another screw that fits. So if this ever strips, very, very easy to replace. But this does require quite a bit of effort to torque out of the body. Can you see that there is a bit of red thread lock over here? Now, I thought this was the crappy red thread lock that comes with most Marui guns, like on a VSR, but this is very, very difficult to torque apart. I needed to use an Allen key and a clamp to basically torque that screw off of the body, which is very, very difficult to do. That was actually the most complicated part for me because I had to use a lot of effort. I have a very, very small crimp thing. Can you see how small this is? Okay, so I was using that and just crimped it on and turn it. Oh, by the way, I don't have many Allen keys that are that long. Okay, like this is the only Allen key that I have in my 50 million Allen keys that actually go into the body. So that's the reason why I found that difficult. But otherwise, everything else is actually quite simple, such as the body. To take apart the internals is very, very simple. It's very, very similar to the way that a WE takes down, with the exception of one thing. Notice that there is no pin for the bolt lock. The bolt lock itself, the bolt, is actually on the trigger box itself, so it's a part of the trigger box when you actually take it out. So in order to strip this down, you actually have to take off the magazine release, punch out that pin, and also take off the selector. That's all you have to do. Those are the only things that you have to worry about. You'll just have to take those off. You have to take the magazine off with the bolt release still there, by the way, so you do have to apply quite a bit of force to basically spin that magazine release off. And that's basically how you get all this stuff off the trigger box. Now after, this trigger box is actually seated in here very, very tightly. You may have to pry it off. So for me personally, I use a slight tap, a polymer tap, and then I pried it off as I got towards the top. It is quite difficult to do first. It gets easier after you do it a couple of times. Oh, and the last thing is that there's one screw in here that secures that trigger box onto the actual body. That's the last thing you have to take out in order to actually take the whole entire trigger box out of the lower receiver. So before I move on, I want to note some safety stuff. There's a couple of stuff that falls out. This polymer piece sits on this side right here. It looks like it's a valve knocker disconnector, but it's just sort of like a filler. I'm not exactly sure why it's there. The other part that has the potential to fly out is the spring for your bolt release. Now, your bolt release actually sits like this. Okay, so it actually comes off very, very easily, so be careful, okay? It's not held in by a pin. The second you take this trigger box out of the body, be wary, it can fly out along with that polymer piece. But for the sake of the demonstration, let's put it on and also have the Z system piece, you know, like the bolt catch, the actual physical part that locks your bolt. Just give me a moment. Oops. Okay, so that's basically how it works. When your magazine is empty, lifts this part, and that lifts up, that prepares for the bolt lock. So basically your bolt will slam right into here and catch it. Now as it catches it, it applies force, right? And this can actually move forward because there's space for it to move forward. After it moves forward, it actuates this piece that's spring loaded with this very, very stiff D10 and this gigantic D10 over here. This is incredibly stiff. This is so stiff that it's actually so difficult. It's really difficult for me to move with my hands. Extremely difficult. But it seems to absorb the shock very, very well. When you actually move your bolt very slowly into the bolt lock and slam it forward, sometimes you can momentarily see this move forward a little bit. Very, very difficult to see. I actually could not demo it on camera, so that's the reason why you don't see it. The hammer internal, notice how weird the hammer spring looks in the hammer. That valve knocker is actuated by this spring up here on the top, you can tell. It simply goes into the valve knocker itself. There is a slit inside. Very, very big valve knocker in my personal opinion. Hammer is very, very tiny. Hammer spring is really stiff. I find this to be quite hard to install. The reason why that is because... Sorry, get off. Can you see that area over here? That area is actually where the hammer spring holds. If you guys have ever taken apart a TMMP, there's like an area that holds onto the hammer spring like this, and another area that you have to hook the hammer on and then cock it and put it over this. And this stake or this pin does not come off the body. I'm not going to pry it off the body either. I haven't been able to get this off, to tell the truth, and I don't really want to hammer it because I don't want to hammer anything on this trigger box. Okay, I'm just letting you know that this pin is that big pin does not come off, and I'm not willing to hammer it. Anyways, you just stake it on, cock the hammer with the hammer spring seated in, but with the hammer this part of the arm caught in here. And that's how you actually install it. Okay, so now I just installed the rest of the parts. We just showed you the hammer earlier. Notice how everything moves. So that moves that. Can you see this silver piece at the back here? This is what actually actuates the... these are all like secondary sears that actually let go of the hammer. So let me demonstrate this for you. Okay, so that's how it works. Do not confuse this. This is not the disconnector. This is the disconnector. Okay? They're both stacked up on each other. That's the reason why it looks sort of confusing. When you actually take this off, if you notice, everything's actually quite simple. The one thing I will complain though, is that because of the sear system and all that stuff, your trigger pull feels a little bit funny. It also feels slightly delayed, okay? So that's the reason why whenever you pull the trigger, you'll feel like there's a very, very long reset and a very, very unpredictable trigger. It's because of this system. You see that actuates that middle piece and that actuates that, okay? That's the reason why you have all that stacked delays and all that stuff. Unlike a normal regular sear that just lets go of the trigger. That just lets go of the, like a WA or a WE, just, this is more like, okay, I'm not describing that very, very well, but basically you can sort of get the idea. And notice, by the way, I'm very confident with all the stuff staying on because all the stuff does stay on, including the spring. And if you're having trouble differentiating these springs, as you disassemble the gun, separate each of the springs according to the stage they're separating at. When I take this off, one spring comes off, so put that aside. Everything comes off very in a certain specific order. Just follow that order and you'll be fine. Don't just pop this off and go. Okay, don't do that, okay? I actually did that when I first did this because I was in a rush to figure out what's inside. Okay, don't be an idiot like me, okay? Just be wary, everything's quite simple. Right? Here is a bonus tip for you guys. I want to show you guys something. So that's with the hammer down. Now, first click is the normal sear click, second click is the disconnector click, okay? That's the disconnector, I just installed it. If you notice very, very carefully, notice how it behaves. Okay, because of that long area for the disconnector, you have to realize that sometimes when your bolt goes back, it's not going back as fast as it can. Now, does this actually affect your gas putback M4 to the point where you will see it not work? No. It's more like if you want to improve upon it, if you want to make the disconnector let go of the hammer immediately, very quickly, ready to fire right off the bat, you can actually shorten that area that locks with that. But before you do that, you have to sort of know your parts a little bit. I'll do it sometime in the future, and I'll show you guys in another video. But basically, if you look very, very closely, watch very, very closely at how it moves. Okay, this is very difficult to move, okay, so be very, very wary about that. I do not advise you to change the spring rate of this, because this relies on this to lock with the slope. Notice that that slope of the hammer and this is actually quite steep, but it locks very, very hard. It holds very, very well. Like, I'm actually quite surprised as to how well. I thought the slope would encourage this to back out, but apparently not. The slope was only meant that so that when this connector moves, it clears it and actually lets it go like that. Or if it's flat like that, it lets it go in a very, very, very tough like this. If you leave a slope, it just sort of slips a little bit easier. I think that's the design behind it. I think, because in my experience, that's more or less what I do to certain sears and certain disconnectors to make it encourage them to lock and disconnect a little bit easier. Just teaching you guys how to install an AG barrel nut onto the Marui M4A1 MWS gas blowback. Now you guys must be asking, how on earth did I do this? I'm going to clarify each and every single point. So first, your barrel nut. You do not need to modify the threads. They simply just install right into the threadings on the Marui M4 MWS. So you must be thinking, is that the end of the installation? No. The thing is that even after you install your AEG barrel nut, even though it fits, you can actually pull your whole entire outer barrel off, even with the barrel nut still on. The reason why that is because of this. This is the original barrel nut that was used for the delta ring and for the 7-inch rail that comes with the Marui M4 MWS. Can you see the size difference? This area where it ends, that's where it pushes the outer barrel into the body and keeps it tight. This keeps it very, very tight, in addition to the barrel clamp that's built into the barrel. Now, because of that, because of how much space there is left, can you see that my Centurion arms rail, my barrel, oh, by the way, this barrel nut is for this PTS Centurion arms 11-inch rail, CMR version, the one with the heavy skeletonization. Anyways, back to my main point, can you see the difference in the area where it starts pushing the barrel? So that's the first difference, okay? This difference means that basically, even if you torque this all the way down to the body, it will not hold the barrel, okay? Furthermore, remember when I told you guys that I can yank the outer barrel? The reason why you can yank it is because the outer barrel diameter is thinner than the inner diameter of the barrel nut. That's the reason why it'll just slip right out. You need an inner diameter that's the same as this. So that's the reason why, if you want to install an AG barrel nut, you need to make a shim. I made a rubber shim that has the same inner diameter and outer diameter as this, and I forced and I stuffed that shim into this barrel nut, then I torqued this barrel nut onto it. Now, you must be thinking, what shim did I use? I did not use metal. I used this. Can you see? This is just a regular pad that you can get anywhere. This is the stuff that you find on chairs or in certain workshops where they don't want to drop stuff. That's it. Okay? It's quite thick. You cannot compress it. It's very easy to manipulate and cut. So basically what I did was I cut one that fits in here with the same inner diameter, forced it in there, used a wrench and torqued it all the way down. Now the reason why I torqued it all the way down is because this thing is incompressible. But if you look closely, it actually can give in a little bit way if you force it enough. So that's the reason why I decided to use this. This gives way a little bit, so that's why I'm using this. And then after you torque it in, this becomes very, very difficult to take off. But your barrel becomes incredibly solid. Sorry about that. Anyways, your barrel just becomes super, super solid. It is so solid that I have to use a wrench to take it off every single time. 401. 401. Yeah. So now we're going to do the firing test. We're going to dump one magazine on full auto and one magazine on semi-automatic. But basically, we're going to first load the magazines. Now, loading the magazines is relatively easy. Okay, so that one's fully loaded. Okay. By the way, each magazine holds about 35 rounds, okay? So both of these magazines were just gassed up on this. And we'll basically take shots with it now. Let's see if I'm on focus. Yes, I'm on focus. So you should be able to see the bolt lock. Just let me double check. Yep. Okay, so we're gonna fire. Single first. Second magazine for fully automatic. Oh, sorry. Do the test at the 20-meter range. By the way, that's 20 meters. I'm actually slightly behind it. And we'll just be using the same setup that I had before on the table. And by the way, the table is actually like technically right behind. And we'll be just shooting at that target down there. Okay, so we're actually going to film all this in real time, so this might be a little bit boring, but we'll try to make it I'll try to hit the target as much as I can. I'm just aiming for the red center of that target, the dead red center. So let's hope I can actually not embarrass myself, because there's actually people outside watching me do this. That was actually pretty bad. I'm hitting. Okay, I can actually see my shots. They were actually pretty. Yeah, I could hear myself hitting something metal. Later on, as I was shooting, my sights were going like boom, because as you can see, I wasn't really settling very quickly. I was just pulling my next shot, as I would normally do in a game. So I probably need to fix up the way I shoot. That's not a very good grouping, but it's mostly localized. I'm guessing I need to change my sights a little bit. I thought I adjusted it on that one, but I guess not. Yeah, anyways, that's the best I can do. Let's go back to my filming studio. Alright guys, so I'm just going to fire the M4 a couple of times just to show you guys a close-up of what the cycling looks like. Sometimes you guys like to get that perspective, but primarily I want to show you guys the trigger. The trigger feels very, very weird, and let me demonstrate that for you. So, I'm demonstrating this with my left hand. So, when you pull the trigger, there's a bit of what seems, this looks like that's all there is to take up, but in reality, that's not the case. In reality, that's the take up. Did you see how that moved? It's not a very predictable trigger. There's an initial, like a resistance point, and then you feel the wall, and then it breaks. it's not easy to find that breaking point. Did you see how my trigger just moved just now? That area? But after you remove that area and then let the take up go again, oh, see? It's not very predictable. It's very unpredictable. Can you still shoot fast with this? Yes, you can, but it's just that if you want that predictable trigger feel, I can tell you that the Marui one does not have it. In fact, I find it sort of difficult to shoot this sometimes. And I want you to watch another thing. This is the reset. It's a very, very long reset. So be very wary when you take slow shots with this. It's good to have that long reset. To be honest, the long reset is not a big problem. It's the breaking point of the trigger that's very, very annoying to me. I personally really want to fix that. But anyways, that's it for the general firing of the trigger. So as usual, I'll let you interpret the results of my shooting test, but if you want some actual numbers of my embarrassing shooting tests, the grouping here on paper is 9.5 inches at 20 meters, from the very bottom to the very, very top up here. You can see a couple of shots up here, about 4 shots landed here. That was my raw accuracy test with a little bit of practice beforehand, and no, I did not zero in my scope for 20 meters. I wanted to zero it for 20 meters. I originally had the zero for 30 meters because I dialed in my hop up for 30 meters when I was playing this outdoors. Because my very first game with this was outdoors and I wanted to shoot 30 meters. So the shots were landing a little bit high. That's the reason why, by the way, at 20 meters. And some of you guys may be asking, why didn't I take my shots super slowly? The reason why is because I wanted to empty a whole entire magazine in my accuracy test, and show you guys the raw footage. I did not want to take 3 minutes doing it, so that's the reason why I was tapping the trigger a little bit faster. The second my sights settled, I pulled the next shot. And that's actually more or less the way I shoot in an actual game, to tell the truth. So in my video, the accuracy is not that good. But if you really think about it, in the end, the groupings are sort of localized, with the exception of these 4 flyers up here, which is honestly not that bad. If you really think about it, this is more or less the size of a head-sized target. So I think it's okay. If anything, I will say the BBs fly relatively consistently. It shoots a lot more consistently than I can. I will say though, if the magazine gets cold, in the range we constantly was charging my mags up with gas and shooting it and testing it, right? As this got colder, we did notice that BBs in the last couple of shots, BBs were not flying correctly, and sometimes it will not have enough hop. So be very, very wary that if you're the type to go in and out of games very quickly, if you're the type to just reload your gas and BBs and just go right back out to a game, be wary that the cold cooldown effect may affect your shots. So be very wary of that. But anyways, let's move on to my good and bad points about the Marui M4 MWS. Starting with my first good point is a solid working gun. I can't recall a time where this did not bolt lock or did not function properly. This is simply a gun that worked right off the box. I did game this twice so far in December, and it's held up the whole entire 2 games. I simply brought it to a game, used it, and it worked. It fired, it did its job. And I do have more games planned for it, which I will be filming those. Which brings me, by the way, to my second point, is the bolt lock reliability. As I mentioned earlier in the video, this thing always bolt locks when the magazine is empty. Take note that even when this gets cold, even if it has that cooldown from me constantly charging the gas when I was at the range, it still bolt locks very, very reliably. And some of you guys might say, well, shouldn't a gas fillback M4 bolt lock reliably anyways? Well, not always. Some do and some don't. But I just wanted to say that the Marui one so far, like right out of the box, no malfunctions, no hiccups whatsoever. The systematic reliability, so far, it's literally perfect. Very difficult to criticize it so far, in my limited experience with it. So, and I will be doing updates if there happens to be any problems. Third good point is that the hop up is consistent. My BBs land consistently enough that I can do follow-up shots quite easily. In fact, when I post up my gameplay video, you'll see me taking shots up to 40 meters with a slight holdover. The reason why is because I only dialed in my hop up for 30 meters, so that's why I need a slight over. Because right before that outdoor game, I only had like a couple of minutes to zero in at their 30-meter range, so that's the reason why the hop up was dialed at 30 meters. But actually, when I actually do film it, you actually see me shooting up to 50 meters with this, because I was actually making shots pretty far. I will say though, the BBs do stray a little bit once you hit 40 to 50 meters. You may need to work on your shots. That's the reason why, by the way, I'm using this UTG scope, is because I need this to shoot precision at long range. Like, even though 30, 40 meters is not very far to most of you guys, it's very, very far to me. This is the second longest gun I have right now. I'm not a very long range person. Most of my guns are SMGs. So that's why I need the scope. It's a UGG CQB Buckster scope with illumination, wind elevation, and it's 3 to 9 power. And I really, really need that 9 power, because I really suck at shooting. Fourth good point is the Cerakoted body. At the beginning of the video, I mentioned that I don't care too much about it being Cerakoted. Now, I absolutely love it. In fact, Tokyo Marui, please make more guns with Cerakote, because this is absolutely fantastic. I find myself being rough with this finish, and it still looks absolutely fantastic. It looks completely brand new. And keep in mind, when I stash this in my bag, I don't really care too much whether or not it gets scratched up, because it's a cold body. It's not like it's a fancy looking gun, but I've been quite rough with it, and it's been holding up very, very well. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, the coating is very, very smooth to the touch, very subdued, very, very clean, very consistent. The one complaint I have is that there is a slight line at the front. Can you see that? You can even see that on my crappy C9 120 camera, on my Logitech camera. There's a line there, like a molding line. You can see that. You can even feel it with your fingers. That's the one part I do not like. But otherwise, the coating of the body is absolutely fantastic. It's honestly the best Cerakoted item that I've ever seen so far. I've seen a couple of other Cerakoted stuff, and honestly, this is by far the most consistent and the most smoothest to the touch that I've ever seen so far, being entirely honest with you. This is something that you sort of have to pick this up and compare it to others to sort of tell. Like, it's really surprisingly smooth. Hopefully you guys can tell one day. And for my fifth and final good point is that the cycling rate is quite decent. On single fire, it's not like it's impressive, but it's not bad. Like, honestly, for the single fire, it's not bad. You can game with it. And on full auto, it's actually pretty fast. I can tell you right now, on full auto, this appears to be just as fast as what you guys see in other videos. On full auto is actually a lot of fun. I've been firing this on full auto by quite a bit, just because I like seeing the bolt move fast and jump a bit. A decent amount of other gas-filled M4s do the same thing too, but it's just quite fun to see this shoot full auto sometimes. I just have fun with that. But I will say the recoil is very, very wimpy. I'm somewhat aware that some people find that the Marui M4 to have a little bit of a kick to it. In my personal opinion, I find that, yeah, there's a little bit of kick, but I feel like the recoil sensation is not as significant as some other gas-filled rifles out there in the market, and it's probably because of the fact that it has a polymer buffer. You know, it's not like there's a lot of weight behind the bolt, so that's quite fair. Which leads me to my bad point. Which my first bad point, of course, is the low recoil sensation. Some people care about it, some people do not. Personally, I do not find it to be a big deal, because I'm willing to sacrifice that if the gun functions very, very well, which it does. My second bad point is this. Okay, that's the bolt being caught in the rotor. Now, it can only get into this position if you use your hands and actually slowly let the bolt rest on the rotor. It actually physically cannot get into this position on its own. So far, I've never once seen anyone or heard of anyone having this problem. It's just more like if you're very, very picky about how smooth your bolt feels, it's still quite smooth, but it's more like this bothers some people. By the way, this is the function of forward assist. I personally like that quite a lot. I don't know why. Okay, but it's incapable of going to that position on its own. In fact, the more I use it, by the way, the less this problem doesn't occur as often as it used to. I don't know if you could tell on camera just now. It just returned on its own. Yeah, so it's not a big deal to tell the truth. Moving on to my third bad point is the magazines. I hate the leaky fill valve, and I hate the position of the fill valve, because these leaky magazines, it's very, very difficult to charge the gas when you have gas spewing out all over the sides. Most Japanese airsoft guns, like Marui, have these kind of design for the fill valves. It's not a very big deal, but I just prefer silent fill valves like a WE, GHK, or a Pro-Win, etc., etc. And the position of the fill valve, as you can see, is not parallel to the base plate. Focus, 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 focus. Why? Oh, there we go. Oh, come on. I hate this camera sometimes. Anyways, the position of the fill valve is like this, and the base plate is like this. So they're not parallel. It makes it somewhat difficult to charge gas into it. If you have a mag pull thing, you will have to take it off every single time to charge gas into this, which is the reason why I just straight up don't run those anymore, because they're very, very annoying. I have to take it off every single time, charge gas, put it back on. I really don't like the position of this. If anything, I would like it to be here. Like, how difficult can it be to have that here? Fourth bad point is that, honestly, the price is very, very steep. You can argue that a WE costs like 2,000 to 2,400 Hong Kong dollars, and then if you Cerakoted it, it'll probably be like 3,000 Hong Kong dollars and beyond. You can also argue that it's Marui, that you pay for the reputation, I guess. I would say that Marui innovates quite often and comes up with systems that works pretty good for the greater part. Not everything is perfect, but they're a pretty good and decent option. More expensive, but they work. The point of this is just telling you that if you add up the price of this and just the gun, just like one magazine and the gun, it's like $500 US. So just keep in mind that the price is very, very steep. A lot of money to invest in for a unique gas pullback system, which I'm pretty sure that'll turn quite a decent amount of people off, just because the price of these are not cheap. I planned very far ahead, and this was pretty much my Christmas present. The rail and the accessories, that is. The gun, I paid for it myself. I even paid for one of these PTS Atom slides. Like, oh my god, just absolutely killed my wallet. I actually feel a little bit sick when I bought this. By the way, this is like 1,800 Hong Kong dollars. Like, oh my god, this thing is so expensive. Like, oh, like my wallet, man. So that's it for my review, guys. The Tokyo Marui M4A1 MWS gas pullback, a working, solid gun that shoots very, very well. I'm still going to run the stock, and I am anticipating that my nozzle might break. But let's see if it will last. I'll update my video if it breaks. But I've been running this for pretty hard, and it still works so far. Like, the systematic reliability is like the best point I have about it so far. The systematic reliability has been absolutely perfect. It functions perfectly, runs pretty decent. It's not the best gas pullback I've ever seen. You can tell sort of that the performance is not bad, but it's not like it's that impressive. But for me, the primary reason as to why I jumped at the system is because if you look very carefully inside at this coating stuff, especially the area that bolt locks, if you look at it very carefully, you can potentially shorten that area, so like probably bolt locks a little bit easier. You can then short stroke your bolt, smooth it out, and you can probably have a very, very fast running gas pullback M4. Which is the reason why I primarily got the system, is because the second I found out that all this internal stuff works like that, I jumped at the system immediately. And it has the plated parts. These plated parts last a very, very long time. I already know this. Is because I have like a Marui MD7. I modified my hammer and my internals. I actually took a Dremel and grinded down my internals, and they're still working. So I trust all this stuff by quite a bit, to tell the truth. In a sense, my review is sort of biased, just because I'm putting a lot of faith into the Marui system. And before I end the video, I'll just give you guys a heads up about what I have for my setup, in case you guys are curious. Just a PTS Centurion Arms 11-inch rail, very, very simple, with the CMR rail panels. Again, this installs very, very easily. So as far as I can tell, aftermarket rails for AEGs appear to be able to fit, unless it uses a very, very special barrel nut system, or if your barrel nut somehow cannot screw on properly because of the barrel. But I have trouble seeing, I'm having trouble imagining what doesn't fit. Moving on, I have my Enforce WML, the Haley Strategic version, and a HSP Thorntail offset. I'm still using the stock comp, and I have a cheap Army mount with a GMP replica of the T1. I'm using this because it can take my gas back shocks. I've been using this on my WEP90. It's been lasting a very, very long time. Works very, very well. I've actually had this for like 2 years now. Probably the best replica T1 I've ever used. Although I don't really like the finishing on it, because the finishing rubs off quite easily. Yeah, so far I can almost scratch it with my fingers a little bit. Anyways, moving on, I have my UGG scope with these basic scope QD mounts that actually came with my scope. This is the CQB Bugster one. Very, very simple scope, 3 to 9 power magnification with illumination, with your basic adjustments. I need the scope for long range. I zeroed this to about 5 to 10 meters, and this is about 30 to 40 meters. I shoot very, very close range, is because I know that I can't take further shots on that because I'm not very good at it. So that's the reason why my whole entire setup, even though I have a big power scope, sort of big powered, I'm still shooting close range, is because I just want precision at close range, which this seems to be able to do quite well. And lastly, I have my Magpul K2 grip and my Magpul MOE stock. Just very, very simple, nothing special. Again, only the screw here is very, very stiff. That's about it, really. Very difficult to take out the screw. Very, very annoying. And lastly is my weapon coat label. Just makes it slightly, you know, just aesthetics, really. Anyways, that's it for my review. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Please feel free to comment, like, and subscribe. And please do follow me on my Facebook page at Rogue System 087. There will be a link in the description box below for you guys. Peace, guys. Happy shooting. Merry Christmas, and have a Happy New Year.